I found the letter on a Sunday afternoon, while cleaning out the bookshelves in the spare room I never use. It was tucked behind a worn-out paperback of Wuthering Heights. How poetic. I hadn't touched that book in years, yet there it was, hiding my past like it knew the weight it carried. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft and tired, and the folds still held the memory of my hesitation. My handwriting looked younger, slanted. Open, unsure. Like I had been writing to convince myself more than to tell you the truth. The date read 8 years ago. I was still married then. Still pretending. It began with, "If you're reading this, it means I never had the courage to say what I needed to say." And I hadn't. I never did. Not when it would have mattered. Not when the silence between us was still soft enough to break with honesty. Not when I could have walked away with some dignity instead of letting it all unravel like a slow burn. I couldn't stop watching. You once told me I was the calm in your storm. What you never said, what I later learned, is that I was also your safe bet. The fallback plan. The woman who loved quietly and expected nothing in return but a fraction of your attention. I mistook your comfort for love. I read that letter twice before folding it again. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared at the curve of the Y in my name, wondering if that version of me ever truly believed she deserved more. You were my husband's best friend. I can still hear how that sounds. How it reads like betrayal on the page. And maybe it was. But it didn't feel like that, not then. We met at a New Year's Eve party in someone's too small apartment with too loud music. I wore a red velvet dress that clung a little too tight, and I had red lipstick I reapplied 3 times before midnight. I was restless. My marriage had grown cold. Routine. No one noticed me anymore. But you did. You noticed. You saw me from across the room and smiled like I was the only person there. I remember clutching a plastic flute of champagne, feeling my face flush. You came over and said, "You don't look like you want to be here." I smiled. You stayed. We talked about nothing and everything, about books, favorite cities, regrets. You told me how people always pretend they're okay when they're barely hanging on. I nodded too hard. Something shifted. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something dangerous. A possibility. An opening. The kind of connection that feels like it's been waiting patiently for its cue. You offered me a drink and said, "You deserve to be the happiest woman in this room." I laughed then. But that moment lived in me. For weeks, I replayed that night like a favorite scene. The lighting. The dress. Your voice. It felt innocent, but in hindsight, it was the first thread pulled loose. And soon, everything would start to unravel. We never slept together. That's the line I repeated like a confession. As if not crossing that threshold somehow made everything else forgivable. But we did something worse. We built a world within whispers and pauses. We created a quiet space where our secrets lived. Where your words were a balm to my fading sense of self. You became the first person I texted when my chest was too tight with sadness. When I had an argument with my husband and locked myself in the bathroom, you knew. When I sat in the car after grocery shopping, crying for reasons I couldn't name, I'd get your message, "You okay?" And somehow, you always knew I wasn't. We exchanged late-night truths. You told me you wished you had met me first. I replied, "Me too." But we didn't. That was our line in the sand. A sentence that held everything and nothing. Sometimes I imagined what would have happened if we'd let ourselves cross it. Sometimes I thanked God we didn't. Then, just like that, you vanished. No explanation. No fight. Just absence. I found out about her on a random Tuesday. Isn't it strange how life shatters on ordinary days? I wasn't looking for anything. I was scrolling through Instagram, trying to distract myself from another lonely dinner, and there it was, her photo. You, with your arm around her shoulders, the both of you beaming like a couple in a lifestyle ad. The caption read, "The start of everything good." It wounded me. Not because I didn't expect you to move on, but because you never gave me the chance to let go. You disappeared, and I waited for a message that never came. I checked my phone like a teenager. I told myself you were just figuring things out. That you'd reach out. But you never did. Seeing her with you made me realize I had never really known you. I knew your silences, your thoughts at 2 a.m., your favorite coffee order. But I didn't know the part of you that could erase me like I was an inconvenience. You once said timing was everything. I suppose you were right. I just didn't know I was already too late. Or maybe I was never in the running to begin with. I didn't leave my husband because of you. That would have been easier to explain. I left because I couldn't breathe in my own life anymore. Because the silence at our dinner table had turned to stone. Because he looked through me like I was fading wallpaper. You were just the mirror. The reminder that something inside me still sparked. That I still wanted to feel chosen. When I finally told him I was leaving, I didn't say your name. He didn't ask. He just nodded, quiet and resigned. Like he'd known for years it was coming. The divorce was civil. But the heartbreak wasn't. I moved into a small apartment, with peeling paint and the smell of someone else's past clinging to the walls. I made it mine, slowly. Painted everything soft green. Bought mismatched furniture. A thrifted table. Fresh flowers every week, no matter how tight the budget. I'd sit on the balcony, drinking coffee and watching the world blur by. I waited for a message from you for a long time. An apology. A reason. Anything. But it never came. 8 years have passed since that pivotal moment in our lives. You've since gotten married, and I've seen the photos. She's truly beautiful, radiating that effortless charm many women possess in those carefully curated images. You appear happy in those snapshots, or at least convinced of your happiness. I've learned to discern the difference between genuine joy and surface-level certainty. In the years following my divorce, I ventured into the dating world and even fell in love with someone. For a brief moment, I believed that I might remarry. But, as fate would have it, that love was fleeting. Something within me had shifted profoundly. I no longer yearned to be rescued. Instead, I craved a sense of inner peace, a quiet existence, free of the turmoil we once shared.
There are nights when I still find myself thinking about you. Typically, when the world is enveloped in stillness, and the only sound breaking the silence is the steady ticking of the old clock in my hallway. I recall how you ignited a sense of aliveness within me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. However, I also vividly remember the deep-rooted ache of being invisible in your world. How easily I faded away the moment reality knocked at our door. I no longer romanticize our shared memories. I've come to understand that what we had wasn't a traditional love story. It was more like an echo chamber filled with longing and unfulfilled desires. It resembled a wound masked as intimacy, a connection that thrived on absence rather than presence. Despite everything, I honor our past. It imparted important lessons unto me. It taught me that I deserve to be chosen completely, and wholeheartedly or not at all.
If I mailed that letter today, it would be a very different one. I wouldn't say I missed you. I wouldn't ask for an explanation. I wouldn't relive the ache of your silence or the ghost of what could have been. I'd simply write, "Thank you for reminding me that I was still capable of feeling deeply, even if it nearly broke me. For cracking me open enough to start over. For being the heartbreak I didn't see coming, and the lesson I didn't know I needed. You weren't my forever. You weren't even my almost. But you were the storm before the calm. And I survived it. Signed, the woman you almost loved. It's spring now. The soft kind, where things don't bloom all at once but slowly, shyly. I live in a new apartment near the sea. The windows let in golden light, and there's a blue mug I use every morning. I've learned to love the quiet. To fill it with music, books, the sound of my own laughter echoing off the kitchen walls. Sometimes I walk by couples and feel a pang, but it passes. I'm not waiting anymore, not for closure, not for answers, not for love to return in someone else's shape. I'm writing again. Living again. Blooming, still. And every now and then, I take out that letter, the old one. The one I never sent. I don't read it anymore. I just hold it, like a relic from another life. And then I put it back, behind Wuthering Heights. Where it belongs. And maybe that's the real ending, not in the silence you left behind, but in the voice I finally found within myself.